to the number one first episode of Comic Spotlight, where we take a closer look or shine a spotlight on comic books, trades, and graphic novels. So since this is a number one episode, this is a great jumping on point for new readers, people who are intimidated by a high issue number and don't want to be bogged down by decades of continuity. Also, this is sure to be a hot collector's item, so make sure you track down all 15 variant foil embossed lenticular hologram covers, and I'm sure that you will be able to resell them in the future and fund your kids' college and pay for your retirement. So today on Comic Spotlight, I want to talk about one of my favorite comic books of the last 2 or 3 years. It's The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. I know what you're thinking, probably. It's a jokey, kind of gimmicky type book. It's really not. My friends and my wife are probably sick and tired of hearing me rave about it every month. But I think it's just amazing, and that's why I wanted to talk about it first. Here's some facts about The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Her real name is Doreen Green. She has all of the powers of a girl combined with all the powers of a squirrel. She has enhanced strength, speed, and agility. She has a prehensile tail and the ability to communicate with squirrels. Squirrel Girl was created by Will Murray and Steve Ditko, who co-created Spider-Man. Her first appearance was in Marvel Superheroes number 8, Winter Special, all the way back in 1992. In which she idolizes Iron Man and hopes to become his crime-fighting partner, and she helps him defeat Dr. Doom. Later, she moved to New York City and earned a reputation as Central Park's greatest defender. After that, she joined the Great Lakes Avengers, and her first sidekick, Monkey Joe, was killed in action in one of their adventures. Now she's a computer science major at Empire State University in New York. And she has a new squirrel sidekick named Tippy Toe. I didn't know all that stuff before I started reading The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. It doesn't really matter. It's pretty accessible, and I really enjoyed this book. Okay, so I have the complete run of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, which started out in January of 2015. And it's written by Ryan North and illustrated by Erica Henderson. And really the only criticism I've ever heard of this comic is that a lot of people don't care for the artwork. And what I'll tell you is that it's grown on me. At first I didn't care for it either, and the quality of the writing kind of carried me over that hump, and now I appreciate the artwork. I think it fits the book very well. Also, you know, there's a lot of comic book illustrators now that are really popular. They can draw really cool, detailed, badass-looking superhero comics, but they can't convey action very well. And sometimes you're confused about what's going on from panel to panel, and I've never had that problem with this book. Okay, so the first series of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl ran for 8 issues, and then Marvel rebooted the universe or something, and they restarted the numbering. And this actually makes a kind of a joke out of it. It says, only our second number 1 issue so far this year. Anyways, it's not a reboot. It's just a continuation. They just, comic book companies like to restart the numbering all the time because I guess they feel like, you know, obviously number 1 issues sell more copies, and I guess they think that people are intimidated by big numbers like 9 or something. But anyways, like I said, you don't miss a beat going from this first series to the second series, so there's nothing to worry about there. Okay, so I'm not going to go into detail over every issue, but I have picked out a handful that are really stand out to me. This is issue 4 from the first series, and obviously in this, Squirrel Girl takes on Galactus, who's come to devour the Earth again, and her and Tippy Toe steal some Iron Man armor and travel to the moon to confront him. And it starts with a fight, but as is usually the case with Squirrel Girl stories, she usually appeals to the villain's better nature, and they reach some common ground and arrive at a peaceful resolution, and which I think is more clever than just knocking each other around. But in this issue, this is a choose-your-own-adventure type story where Squirrel Girl teams up with her friend Koi Boy to fight the Swarm, who's a villain composed of a swarm of bees. And this is a really, really fun concept I've never seen before in a comic. Basically, as you read each panel, there are arrows that branch off of it, and you can choose which direction you want the story to go. And I think this is really clever. It must have been a total nightmare for them to write and illustrate. In this issue, this is like a dream sequence where Squirrel Girl takes on Dr. Octopus and Venom and Count Nefaria, and she ends up explaining binary to Count Nefaria. And so you actually learn something in this, and it fits her because she's a computer science major in the comics, and I just think that's really clever and interesting, so I thought that was fun. In this issue, this is like the 25th anniversary celebration, and this has some backstory, some new backstory that you'd never seen before for Squirrel Girl, and how she came up with her first costume. And anyways, in this she meets the Hulk and helps fight Abomination, one of her first adventures. So that's really cool. And then this is a more recent issue where Squirrel Girl meets a philanthropist who wants to become her benefactor. And so this woman basically funds a new suit for Squirrel Girl, complete with flying squirrel wings and a rocket pack so she can fight crime more effectively. And this one was hilarious. Okay, so this is the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Beats Up the Marvel Universe original graphic novel. And this is a really fun story. Squirrel Girl accidentally gets cloned, and her clone decides to do away with the heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. And as she goes along, she uses the tools and equipment of each character to defeat the next. So, like, she uses Magneto's helmet, for instance, to defend against psychic attacks from other characters. And anyways, this was real fun. I enjoyed the crap out of it. This is a really nice hardcover book. I think it came out last fall, and it's about $25, so it's not cheap, but I think it's totally worth it. I didn't regret the purchase at all. It's not entirely necessary if you're reading the comic book series. You don't have to pick this up. You'll probably want to, but you'd be kind of in the dark if you went straight to this without reading the comic book series. And so far, they haven't done it yet, but I imagine that things that happen in this story will eventually come up in the comic book series. So, anyways, I highly recommend it. Even if you have to pay full price, I think it's totally worth it. I really enjoyed this. Okay, so Squirrel Girl ends up having to deal with a bunch of C and D list villains typically, and Deadpool has not made an official appearance in this series yet, but apparently he has supplied her with a deck of Deadpool's Guide to Supervillains trading cards, and Squirrel Girl has used these cards pretty much since the first issue, and to give her some tips on how to fight these supervillains. And I think it's pretty clever. It's a lot better than having characters explain things to each other or having a narrator explain it. She can just use these reference cards that she keeps in her utility belt to give you quick facts and statistics about the supervillain that she's got to go up against. So that helps make it pretty user-friendly. Squirrel Girl has done battle with lots of different villains for the Marvel Universe. She's also had a lot of really fun team-ups with different superheroes. And one of my favorite aspects of this comic is Squirrel Girl's cast of supporting characters. Obviously, there's Tippy Toe, her squirrel sidekick, who's proven herself to be a valuable asset over and over again. There's Nancy Whitehead, who is Squirrel Girl's roommate and a fellow computer science major. Nancy tags along in a lot of her adventures, and she's usually the voice of reason. She's got a lot of common sense, and for fun, she likes to write superhero fan fiction with her cat Mew as the protagonist. There's also Koi Boy, who is a kind of like Aquaman. He's another fellow student of Squirrel Girls. And there's the Chipmunk Hunk, who recently revealed that Squirrel Girl was the inspiration for him to become a animal-themed costumed superhero. And finally, there's a robot guy with his brain and eyeballs in a jar for a head. So, if you're a social justice warrior and you feel like you want more diversity in your comic books, and you're a brain in a jar maybe, and you feel like you're underrepresented, then this book is for you. And if you feel like that's all a bunch of crap, and you don't like this diversity being shoved down your throat, then this book is also for you, because none of these characters feel shoehorned in. It's all real organic and natural. They're all college students in New York at a computer science school, so it makes sense that you'd have different, ethnicities and people from diverse backgrounds. And it just kind of flows, and they don't make mention of their race or creed or color. And it's just, it's all inclusive without making a big deal about it. And that's another thing I like about this. Okay, so I'm going to flip through these comics so you can see all the covers while I wrap this up. One thing that I really like about Squirrel Girl is that it's no slave to whatever crossover event Marvel happens to be doing at the time, forcing you to buy comics that you don't really want to feel like you have a complete run. The guy at the comic book shop that I go to told me that this has a relatively low print run, so that might make the comics more valuable as time goes on if it gains in popularity, but it also makes back issues harder to find and more expensive. So I recommend, to save time and money and energy, just pick up the trade paperbacks instead, unless you really, really want to track down all these individual issues. Okay, so I started picking up this book because of the novelty of a lighthearted, silly superhero. That's how they got me in the door. But they keep me buying this book every month because of the inventive stories, the humor, and the overall positive message. This is an all-ages book, so there's no bad language or sex, and only mild violence. And that's not to say it's dumbed down for kids at all. An adult will completely enjoy this, I believe, if they like comic books. Okay, so I'm a new dad, and I hope to eventually give these comics to my daughter when she's old enough to read, because I really like the positive message that this book has. The artwork is simple and stylized, but the proportions of the characters are drawn realistically. Squirrel Girl is body positive and won't give your kids a complex. More so than her superpowers, Squirrel Girl typically uses her brain powers to defeat the bad guys and win the day. She's creative and kind, accepting of others, and stands up for what's right. I think that Squirrel Girl is a good role model for kids, especially girls. I think that's probably more important nowadays than ever. I genuinely believe in this comic book. I believe in Squirrel Girl. And until next time, eat nuts and kick butts. Bye.